Howdy y'all, welcome to History by Phillips. I'm your teacher, Mr. Phillips. So last week we went over colonial America. In colonial America we talked about three big things. First was the European countries that colonized North America. Number two, the 13 colonies, pretty much the English colonies. In the 13 colonies we looked at the New England, Middle, and Southern colonies, how they functioned, how they operated. Their economies was based on a lot of whaling, fishing, shipping, especially in New England, but mostly agriculture. And when we talk about agriculture, you have to mention the slave trade. Slavery in America is getting kicked off well underway in this time period. They are being imported from Africa, part of the Triangle Trade. So you have many Africans coming, especially from Central and West Africa, coming to the east coast of the United States. We also talked about how society functioned, how families lived in one or two room houses, and the American identity, how that started emerging, especially along Appalachia. The Baptists and Methodists, they had the bright idea during the Great Awakening. If you recall, the Great Awakening was pretty much a big revival that happened throughout the colonies in the 1740s by John Edwards and George Whitefield. But anyways, long story short, the Baptists and Methodists, pretty much, especially ones living in the Appalachian area, especially central and southern Appalachia, they set up their mountain churches and they started electing their own leaders. They got into their mind, if they can elect their own religious leaders, why can we not elect our own political leaders? Not how England's done it. If you don't know anything about England's government at this time, it's a monarchy, and usually the king or queen will appoint governors and dukes and all sorts, but they're appointed by the king. With the Great Awakening, the colonists are starting to buck the system, if that makes sense. They're like, well, we can pick our church leaders, let's pick our own political leaders. So you start seeing the emergence of town hall meetings. We have them all the time. I'm sure there's one in Newport going on, I think, here soon. But it starts out with town hall meetings. They start discussing legislation and laws and things of that sort. But I digress. This week we'll be talking about the spirit of independence. So we realize the three main countries that settled North America. Just to recap, you have England on the east coast here with the 13 colonies. You got France along the Mississippi River and the Great Lakes area. And then you have Spain down here in Florida and pretty much way over here in California. We'll worry about that at a later date. Don't worry, we'll get to it when we talk about Manifest Destiny, Lewis and Clark, all that stuff. But today we're going to focus on a war. I like to think of this as the actual First World War. This war was fought in Europe and the Americas, across an ocean. First war of that kind, first war of that's happened like that in history. If I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it's the first war that's fought on two separate continents on a large scale. But this will be known as the French and Indian War. The combatants will be the French and English. We call it the French and Indian War because the Indians typically sided with the French. Pardon me, I'm a little under the weather. But the Indians typically sided with the French for various reasons. They were Indian tribes that did side with the English, but we'll get into that. So the big thing that's up for debate, let me get my maps here, I'm a map guy, I love my maps, is the Ohio River Valley. Move my big head here. You don't recall, Ohio River Valley is pretty much this. The reason why, so England's over here, France is over here, everybody's fighting over this territory. Winner gets this region. Now the reason why both countries want this region is because it's rich in natural resources, particularly beaver fur. That was just the Gucci of its day. I'm not up on the Ashley purse, the Louis Vuitton. Beaver fur from this area was the hot thing in Europe at the time. It was making money hand over fist. That's what France was interested in. So the Indians would typically side with them because they was wanting fur. On the other hand, you have the English colonies. They are interested in fur as well, but they want the land. They're agriculture. Remember, they're making money hand over fist over cash crops like tobacco and indigo. So they're wanting to take this over and kind of start turning it to farmland because they scouted it out. They feel like it's going to be pretty good farmland. So the English want it for that. So the Indians typically sided with the French because, yes, the French might come in and set up a post here or there, but they're not there to move in. They're just there to maybe for summer, then they leave, then they come back for summer. They're there just to get catch beavers and other animals of that sort. The English, on the other hand, are wanting to move in. They're wanting to go in to their land, they're going to try to live among it, but essentially they're going to be at odds with each other. Most Indians do not want that, so they typically sided with France. France would also, it's more likely you'll see a Frenchman married into Indians than you would see an Englishman married into the Indians. It still happened with the English settlers, but typically more often with France. They typically marry into the Native Americans marry into the French. That doesn't, however, mean English was on bad terms with all the Native Americans. They tried to get the Iroquois Confederacy. Iroquois Confederacy consisted of several tribes: Mohawk, Seneca, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher all these Indian names, but Oneidas. Pretty much up and down the Appalachian area. The Iroquois Confederacy said they would not side with them, but they would remain neutral, meaning they would not take sides. They wouldn't support France, they wouldn't support England, they wouldn't hurt France, and they wouldn't hurt England. They'd stay out of it, which would help the English. But the war gets kicked off. Our first prominent figure you might have heard of makes his appearance. Good old George Washington. George Washington, he is the leader of the Virginia militia. The Virginia militia is tasked with taking out one of the French outposts called Fort Duquesne. I'm in a lesson right now.
You're fine.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I got called by the office. But anyway, where was I at? Oh yeah, George Washington, he's a leader of the Virginia militia. The militia is pretty much a group of soldiers that are not trained. He's roughly 18, 20 years old at this time, but he is tasked with taking out Fort Duquesne up here in Round, Pennsylvania. Washington, not supplied well enough, not experienced enough, he gets captured right away. So our first president of the United States, his first action he's ever seen, he gets captured. The French end up letting him go. Did a prisoner trade. They got some of their guys back and they ended up letting Washington go. But yes, George Washington makes his appearance here and he gets captured the very first thing in the French and Indian War. France would be in control of the war for the most part. They were winning. They were better, well supplied. They had better trade networks, so forth, so they can supply their soldiers a little bit better. Plus, in Europe, they're winning as well. Plus, they have the Indians raiding the frontier towns. I'm talking about areas like the fringes of East Tennessee, Western North Carolina, up through Western Virginia, Kentucky. Like this area, the Indians are hitting those like being a nuisance, and it's making the English settlers mad. All this would change, however, with a guy named William Pitt. So William Pitt, best way to think of him is second in command in England. He is the Secretary of State over there. But pretty much he gets put in charge and he fixes England's problems. That's a rough story of it, but he gets the English army into gear. He raises taxes, so on and so forth, because he knows it's going to take a lot of money to beat the French in North America. Long story short, England gets better trained, better equipped. They start beating France in North America. They end up winning the French and Indian War because of William Pitt's planning, design. He's just a great leader at this point, William Pitt. But in order to do that, they came up with the Treaty of Paris. The Treaty of Paris ended these. I'm sorry, folks, got discombobulated there. The Treaty of Paris. It would be signed pretty much ending the French and Indian War. France would lose pretty much all their lands where they were in North America and large parts of Canada. So now you have Britain in control of pretty much all of North America besides the parts that Spain is on, down there in Florida and California. But to keep the peace with the Indians, the English government, they passed something called the Proclamation of 1763. I wonder if that's the next map. The Proclamation of 1763. So basically what that states is no English colonist is allowed to move west of the Appalachian Mountains. Now there's a problem with that because you already have some settlers who kind of broke the law, and they're already living in the backwoods of western North Carolina, western Georgia, eastern Tennessee, western Virginia, those areas. Some of them just make their living up in the mountains, especially the Scots-Irish. They would be prominent through Pennsylvania all the way down to Tennessee. That's where they made their home. Now you have England saying, hey, no, you can't live there, get up and move. It's like, well, we just beat these Indians that we was at war at. We're just going to live here. No. So there's starting to be a strain with the colonists and the English government, especially in the backwoods, especially central and southern Appalachia. At the same time the proclamation's going on, you have Pontiac's War. Now, Pontiac's War, pretty much an Indian rebellion, skimmed through it up through here in the Pennsylvania, Michigan area. While the Indians are up there still killing English colonists, the English are saying you can't go west of the Appalachians. This will make these settlers angry. They're like, what? Why is somebody over 1,000 miles away on the other side of the ocean telling us where we can and cannot live? That coupled in with their desire to pick their own leaders, there's starting to be tension between the colonists and England. Tomorrow's video, we'll take a look at how those tensions start getting more sensitive, I guess you can say. Because for England to win this war, they had to raise taxes, and I'm sure everybody knows. Why we went to the war in the American Revolution. Part of it was to do with taxes. Well, some of these taxes are going to result from the French and Indian War. Because anytime a country goes to war, it costs a lot of money. They're going to raise the taxes. Colonists are going to get upset, not because they raise taxes, but because they're not getting representation in government. Meaning they don't have somebody there to voice their opinion. They're upset about that. A little Tennessee history. I know a lot of folks talk about Tennessee history. At the same time this French and Indian War stuff's going on, we have something called the Massacre at Fort Loudoun. Basically, you have some Cherokees attacking Fort Loudoun. They caught them in a surprise because the Europeans are used to fighting in like straight on style. Like, you guys will shoot your rifles, I'll shoot mine. March forward, march forward, march forward. You know the drill. Well, a lot of the Indians saw that and thought that was just stupid. It's like, why would I line up in front of you so you can shoot me? So they would be hiding behind the trees, the rocks, grass, stuff like that. We call this guerrilla tactics. They might not have been as well equipped, but they had better tactics. They can hit them hard and leave before the British realize what's going on. This happened quite a bit in the back country, especially the Tennessee area. So this will be beneficial when it comes to the American Revolution, because these guys that's been dealing with these Indian fighters will take their tactics that they learned from this war and apply it to the American Revolution down the Piedmont area towards South Carolina. But we'll talk about that, I think, next week when we're going into the American Revolution. But to recap, rivalry in North America. It was England versus France over the Ohio River Valley. England would end up winning because William Pitt would end up taking charge of the government in England, just to think of it that way. Indians will be mad. They feel betrayed. There's a lot of trees that are broken with them. Pontiac's War is an example. But a lot of the colonists start getting upset with England over the taxing, over telling them where they can't live with the Proclamation of 1763. That's the big one from today, the Proclamation of 1763. But yes, England ended up winning. We're going to talk about the after effects of the French and Indian War tomorrow, the taxes, the laws that get passed, and we'll be getting into Constitution here soon. And I love talking about the Constitution, but we'll be talking about that here at a later date. But until next time, this has been History by Phillips. I've been your teacher, Mr. Phillips. Take care. Peace.